it's hard for me to get like a good hearty laugh out of myself. It's rare that somebody says something that genuinely makes me laugh. I laughed incredibly hard at the part where the girl from Fang shoots Sisu, because it's a wide shot of her and you can see that she's just standing there on the cliff. She's unarmed. There's no barrels or boxes or secret blankets or anything near her. The camera's on her. It closes in. Waist up shot. Out of nowhere, she pulls a crossbow out of thin air.
Dragon claw, wing and scale. Come now, let's examine a tale of the greatest beast ever considered. Another episode of Big Flying Lizards.
Welcome, Big Liz community. I am your host, Bryce Wilson, here to start us off on our very first live stream. We have our first live stream guest right here. We have T.D. Orel. T.D., you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and just give us the whole rundown.
Absolutely. My name's T.D. Orel. I'm honored to be here. I know I'm a downgrade from Austin, but I'm going to do my best regardless. I'm an indie author who predominantly writes dragon fantasy, so I think that's why I so graciously received the invite, because I am also a dragon nerd, so I'm hoping to share my dragon insights with you guys today. My series is called Titan's Nest. The first book is available right now, and the second book is coming out this year, as well as a handmade stop-motion film that my dear friend Zach and I are working on together, that we've been working on for we're headed into year 3 of this project. And like I said, it's a dragon tale, and it's inspired by some of the classic Dragon Rider fantasies maybe you grew up reading as a kid. And it follows the unlikely story of a character named Darren Dustfell and his journey to becoming a bitten knight, which in my world are the Dragon Riders. So that's a little bit about me. Honored to be here and to talk about a very mediocre Disney film.
No, TD, if you don't mind, I'd love to just ask you a few questions that are fantasy related. When we discussed Quest for Camelot, that was very much an influential film for me growing up that solidified a lot of love for fantasy. Obviously, some of the old animated Lord of the Rings did so as well for me. What would you say are some of the inspirations, or just what got you into fantasy? Because clearly you love fantasy just as much and possibly even more than what we do over here. So what got you down that road?
Lord of the Rings, of course, had a huge impact on my life. The first the Fellowship of the Ring awoken something in me, for sure. And my mom was a teacher. She really wanted my brother and I to read a certain amount of books when we were kids, and, you know, small children's novellas. And I had somehow convinced my mom that graphic novels and comic books were the equivalent of reading a novel, essentially. And so she agreed to just let me consume a lot of comic books. And actually, one of the first comic books I picked out just because I liked the cover was a Dragonlance comic. And I didn't even fully know what the fantasy genre was about. But I remember grabbing that comic, and the opening panel is a guy on horseback just jamming a lance into this big blue dragon's chest. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but I need more of it. And I think it just snowballed from there. And then I think I discovered Aragon, and the Inheritance Cycle was the first actual fantasy series I read from start to finish. And then after seeing The Fellowship of the Ring is when I first picked up the actual book, Fellowship of the Ring, and just been obsessed with fantasy, and I consumed a lot of Marvel comics as well, and so that has huge influence. I really love anime, Naruto, the original Naruto, and the Naruto Shippuden as well. Definitely affected me growing up and inspired me a lot. So yeah, those were some of my initial introductions to fantasy content.
I just came up with this next question right on the spot, but you said it, but top 3 favorite anime on the spot right there. It doesn't have to be in any order. If you have it in order, awesome, but what would you say is your top 3?
Oh, wow. Okay. Shippuden is number 1.
Okay.
Akame ga Kill. It's only a 1 season, but great. And I might say My Hero. I know that's kind of a generic answer, but I really like My Hero. Though. It's really great. Yeah. What are your top 3? I'd love to hear.
Oh, top three. I mean, mine are so basic. But Attack on Titan's number one. Like, you just really
Yeah,
can't beat Attack on Titan. But a
great.
close second is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. I love Brotherhood. It's really what got me to anime. And
Oh, cool.
then Code Geass is number three for me.
Yeah, great answers. Full. Okay, I'm gonna add Full Alchemist. It's like right there under my. It's probably in my top. We'll say it's top 3.5. But I just got to rewatch it recently because my wife has never seen it, and I convinced her she needed to watch it. So I had a lot of fun like rewatching it with her for the first time.
I will be the first to tell you that I rewatch so many different of these anime. I'm pretty sure that I have rewatched all the way through Attack on Titan at least 6 or 7 times. I don't know if that's a sign of a healthy person right there or not,
That's
but
impressive.
yeah, there. I need to direct you towards some people to tell them that that's impressive.
Yeah, gladly.
But
I'll die on that hill. That is impressive.
well, as much as I'd love to talk about anime, and I'm sure we might have more fun talking about anime all day, we do have a movie to talk about. The movie that we're going to be discussing is a movie that came out in 2021. It's called Raya and the Last Dragon. Raya the Last Dragon is a 2021 American animated fantasy action adventure film produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios and released by Walt Disney Picture. It was directed by Don Hall and Carlos Lopez Estranda and co-directed by Paul Briggs, Don Ripa, and produced by Peter Del Vecchio. The screenplay, which is based off a story idea by Bradley Raymond and Helen Knafik, has a story following a princess warrior, Raya, as she seeks the fabled last dragon to save her father and the land of Kamandra from evil spirits known as the Droon. The film is inspired by traditional Southeast Asian culture. During the design and animation, the filmmakers focused on a diverse environments and characters while maintaining authentic cultural representation. The movie was released in theaters in the United States on March 5th, 2021, simultaneously the platform Disney Plus for customers with Premier Access. The release was twice delayed from its November 2020 due date due to the COVID pandemic worldwide. The film was the third most streamed film in 2021 and grossed $30.4 million worldwide. Critics gave the film positive reviews, and it was nominated for several accolades, including an Academy Award nomination for Best Animated Feature. That being said, TD, what's your overall thoughts of the film?
Actually, this film is really frustrating for me because I think it has the bones of actually being a really, really great movie. There's a lot of cool cool world building elements. The character design is interesting and the shots are awesome. Overall opening shot when she's on the roly-poly thing in the desert. And there was a couple shots that really stood out. Like when the doors open at the spine and she comes out by herself to face the Fang and she's just standing there in her cloak and the snow background. I'm like, this had so much potential to be a really great film. So I think overall I just felt frustrated with a lot of, well, I'll tell you this. I have a rule. If Dwayne The Rock Johnson or Aquafina's in a movie, I usually avoid that movie at all costs. So I already come in I don't want to watch anything with Aquafina in it usually. So I came in with that mindset and I stand by that mindset after watching.
Hey, I don't blame you, and you're certainly not alone. I mean, I didn't grow up with WWE. That was too violent for my LDS parents to allow me to watch that. So,
Yeah,
I didn't get indoctrinated with the love of The Rock at a young age, but I also know that there's
sure.
a lot of people that just have that love for The Rock. But no, I think that's a totally fair. I think there's a lot of positive things that are in this film. However, and I don't know if you felt this way or not, up until, and we'll talk more into it once we get to the chapters, but up until the Droon actually got released, I felt like it was just so cheesy and just so, I don't know if that's where they just decided to go back and mess with stuff going on, but the lines were just so cheap. At one, she's like, "Are you supposed to have this sacred thing?" And just having, I'm like, no, of course she's not. Why are you over here screaming it out to the to the people? But No, it has the potential, and I actually did really appreciate. And I think I've mentioned this quite a bit on the podcast, but I really am a sucker for different Asian cultures, specifically Asian architecture and Asian art in general. So seeing a lot of that
So cool.
represented, yeah, it's amazing, and just seeing it in a wide variety because you just saw the different not continents, but the different tribes and how they sort of embodied a different part of what I assume is Asia. You have
Yeah.
the more just mountain tribes, you have the more river folk, and I don't know. It was just amazing to be able to see that. And I'm excited to dive in and talk about more of the specific spots. But do you have any other first impressions of the movie that you want to discuss before diving into the chapters?
Same thoughts. If any fantasy sci-fi story has factions, I'm immediately a little more invested. I love factions. My story, Titan's Nest, has 6 really distinct factions. I'm like a big sucker for like really obvious split groups that have different cultures and different clothes and different lifestyles. And so that, like Avatar: The Last Airbender, I think, is the mastered the faction thing. So initially I was like, okay, I'm super interested, and it spirals downward from there. But I love a faction.
No, even though it was a little cheesy because how she was explaining it, I know what they were
Yeah.
trying to do when the father was like, "Do you know who's coming to meet with us?" And she's like, "Oh, the spine and the talent," and just like, I'm like, this would not actually come up like this in a normal conversation.
No. Yeah, that's classic exposition dump done poorly. It's
Oh,
rarely done well in a movie at the beginning when you just do an exposition dump and you're just doing it in dialogue. It's also hard to do it just via narration, so it's tricky. It's done poorly, but I know what they were attempting.
I won't bash because I can't imagine how difficult it is to come across as something that is common knowledge to somebody trying to introduce a story. And I'm sure you can even touch on that a little bit, just like as an author, where I mean, as just in full transparency, I have started reading Titan's Nest, and it's really good. However, I will be finishing it. I'm a sucker for dragons and dragon riders specifically. I mean,
So I can
dragons
tell,
are
yes. I appreciate you picking it up. That means a lot. I appreciate it.
no, of course, but so how when coming with your dragon rider idea in general, how do you come across where it is the dragon riders are almost the Navy SEALs, you might say, or just the most badass warriors in the land, but we as the readers don't necessarily know that right off the bat. What process did you come into it trying to relay who they are, what they do, and how important they actually are?
Yeah, every author strives to show and not tell, right? So my goal is to not say, oh my gosh, the Bitten Knights are the most feared warriors in all of Dazarath. My goal is to avoid that sentence as best I can and to show it through their actions and how the environment and the characters and the enemies react when a Bitten Knight or a dragon steps into a scene. You, as the reader, should feel through their expression and how they're feeling. You should gather from those reactions that you go, oh my gosh, okay, this person's really powerful. This person's really dangerous. That's the goal. I'm not saying I do it well, but that's the goal, right? So that's what you're striving for is, as I've heard every writing tip ever is show, don't tell
For
explicitly.
sure. And I know that it is so difficult. I think one author that we both share a love for, Brandon Sanderson, when I've read The Way of Kings for the first time, for the first 200 pages, I was so confused on what was going on. And it wasn't until like going back to it for a reread of A Way of Kings, I'm like, oh, this is what he was trying to do. He's amazing at getting that build up and getting that payout, but the initial like trying to understand, I'm like, where, what is going on?
Yeah, I think he's a great example of almost the opposite of doing an expo dump, right? Where he just thrusts you into the world. And that's why his books are so long, because he treats you like the movie Raya with that expo. It treats us as an audience like we're dumb. Like we won't be able to figure out on our own what these different cultures are about. Someone like Brandon Sanderson, he knows that we as readers aren't idiots, and he's trusting that we're going to have the capacity to actually read his work and start to piece things together on our own. And if you're like not a fantasy reader, if you're coming into Way of Kings and you've only read like self-help nonfiction stuff, like Way of Kings seems so gnarly and so tense, and you're just like, what the hell is happening? Like you said, the first 200 pages. So there's for sure a balance where you want to be somewhere in the middle where you're not doing the expo dump, but you're also maybe not making your reader read 1,500 pages before they know what a Night Radiant is.
That might be, but again, who are we to judge
Yeah,
easily the king of fantasy right now?
right. For sure.
We're just loyal subjects. But
Agreed.
again, I know we keep trying to deviate away from it, but let's go ahead and dive into the
Sorry.
first. No, no, no. I was the one who asked the questions. I'm the one who's trying to prolong the suffering, I guess, over here. But let's go ahead and dive into the first chapter. The first chapter, we establish an initial prosperous state of Kamandra, where humans and dragons coexist peacefully. There is a devastating impact from spirits called the Droon. They're a mindless spirit that can turn everything to stone. Sisu, the last dragon, uses her magic to create a gem and vanquish the Droon, but at the cost of losing all of the other dragons and herself. The land divides and turns against each other from one united Kamandra to 5 warring tribes: Fang, Heart, Spine, Talon, and Tail. Raya is a princess of the Heart tribe and is raised to protect and defend the gem, but her father, Chief Benja, wants to reunite all of the tribes together to create the land of Kamandra again. However, during this uniting prospect, the Fang come in and try to steal the gem, shattering it and releasing the Droon back into the world. During the chaos, Raya loses her father, Chief Benja, to the Droon, and she gets thrown into the water where the Droon cannot access her. So, just based off of the introduction, learning the little bit of the lore, I'm just going to echo something that you said earlier, and it probably is going to be something we say throughout. Awesome lore. Like, I really enjoy the lore of it. I love what's going on, but just how they execute just seemed, I don't even want to say that it was sloppy, but it was cheesy.
Yeah, totally. And another thing that I hate in films that's just like plagued films in the 2000s is the amorphous blob villain, or like the big magical cloud. That's so frustrating to me. It's not an interesting villain. It's cool that it turns people into stone. Visually, again, everything looks great visually. If you took the time to create a somewhat humanoid character that's even just controlling the Droon things, whatever they're called, I'd be far more invested. I'm not interested at all in like defeating these amorphous blobs that their only purpose is to consume. I want them to have a purpose outside of that, and I want them to have motives that maybe like we can kind of connect with. So like the amorphous blob is such a bummer for me. Not super interesting.
I definitely agree with that. When we talked about the never-ending story, in the first never-ending story, the villain is the Nothing. And
Yeah.
it's the same idea. Like, yes, it's terrifying, but I even feel like the Nothing had a little bit more of an entity or idea because it had the wolf. I'm blanking on the wolf's name, but that was sort of its minion to go hunt down Atreyu, while the Droon are literally, they're like zombies in like a zombie apocalypse. Right. Like they're even less than zombies because they're just blobs. But visually they look, like you said, they look so good when they
look cool for sure
around.
I just wish like some sort of sorcerer shaman was casting them out, and
yes,
someone that we wanted to defeat.
I don't know if you watched The Last Dragon or not. That's currently on Hulu. I think it is actually on Disney Plus too. It's another movie that was animated and came out recently.
It's also called The Last Dragon?
I believe it's called The Last Dragon.
No, I haven't.
I'm sure somebody is letting me know right now that it's what it actually is. But I almost wish they combined the villains of these movies together, because there's a guy who has some sort of disease in this who's dying, and he's trying to consume like dragon blood and consume like dragon essence to become like, to not die, and he just becomes this almost evil necromancer sorcerer dragon like thing. And Like, just do that.
That's
Just
awesome.
do exactly.
Yeah.
Like, it can even just play off of the whole, like, there's somebody who just didn't trust everybody else and tried to hoard power, and that, again, like, we could be here all day trying to rewrite a movie.
Yeah.
Even though it was cheesy, I did appreciate how Raya, and I'm blanking. Is it her friend? What was her friend's name?
Oh, the girl
Namari?
from Fang.
Yeah, I think it's Namari. I,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
do I do appreciate that they were like, oh, I'm a dragon nerd. Oh, you're like, what? We're dragon nerds. Like, which, you know, we're dragon nerds. So like, but
I
there's a
feel
lot
seen.
better ways.
There's a lot
Exactly.
better ways. Yeah. So that's another thing. Another thing that's really just drops this movie a couple bars is the modern dialogue, modern phrases, anything like that just immediately removes you from the setting. And the whole idea of fantasy film is you want to be pulled into the setting and you want to forget
Yes.
that our world is real. So as soon as they say like Sisu has some terrible lines about like a group project about pop lock and drop it, and yeah, the dragon nerd thing, it's just cringy, right? It makes you roll your eyes. So you want to avoid those lines the best you can. They really lean into those lines. Also, why is no one guarding the dragon heart thing?
They trust each other. That's the whole message of the movie. You need to trust.
But no, but I just feel like if it's so important, like we couldn't post one adult to at least watch it, keep an eye on it when they're gonna invite a bunch of people over.
Then you don't have trust for the other people. No, I agree.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a bit, and maybe it was guarded because technically didn't Raya bring her friend in, like Namari? This is so bad that I can't remember her
Yeah,
name.
she snuck her up there, but there wasn't like a ton of sneaking involved because they just kind of walked right up. I guess everybody was on enjoying the feast, but still,
But
it seems
again,
like
that
a great time to have somebody posted at the
again,
Dragon
yeah,
Gem.
just have
So
one person. You like
right,
technically the father is the best warrior. Raya is the second best. Have the third best warrior there guarding it. Like, no, I totally agree. But if you're all right, let's go ahead and dive into the second section of our the film.
perfect.
Raya is going across the land. It's clearly devastated. There's statues of people that were turned to stone from the drone. She is trying to find Sisu, as it was relayed by Namari that Sisu is still out there. She finds Sisu in the land of Tail, and we come to find out that Sisu, the dragon, was actually the least powerful of all the dragons. She just got credit for stopping the drone. They've discovered that if they combine all of the pieces together, that she will get her powers, those powers that her siblings had back, and be able to stop the drone. So they team up with three other individuals: Boone, a young restaurant owner from Tail; Noi, a baby con artist in Talon; and Tong, a warrior from the Spine, each with their own motivations and losses due to the Droon. There is a lot of messages and working discussing how trust is being needing throughout the land and how there's a lack of trust, and the conflicts that each of the characters face, particularly when it comes to trust and coming together, really shows the divide of the country. We end with Raya trying to trust her friend Namari. However, Namari kills Sisu when trying to betray her. I will say it wasn't until the very, like, almost to this point at the very end of this chapter, they did a great job of, like, because you knew that that Fang was going to betray them again. But it wasn't like, oh, Fang's the bad guys, they're the bad area. It was more like, no, hey, they do not like us.
Yeah,
We are the one that caused all this chaos. Why do we, the minute that everything gets restored, they're all going to turn on us. So I actually don't think that was too poorly executed. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that section in general? I know that was a lot. It's a big,
yeah,
beefy
big chunk.
section, but I'm happy to dive in wherever you want to dive in on that.
The cat things that Fang rides, awesome. It's cool
Yes.
world building, great character design, interesting, and then it makes you think like, okay, what does everybody in every faction ride or what kind of animals they have in their area. That's awesome.
Yeah.
The ship design that I forget his name, the little chef with the shrimp on
Boom.
top of the boat, looks great. Another awesome design. Things I'm like, cool, I want more of this stuff. It's hard for me to get like a good hearty laugh out of myself. It's rare that somebody says something that genuinely makes me laugh. I laughed incredibly hard at the part where the girl from Fang shoots Sisu, because it's a wide shot of her and you can see that she's just standing there on the cliff. She's unarmed. There's no barrels or boxes or secret blankets or anything near her. Camera's on her. It closes in. Waist up shot. Out of nowhere, she pulls a crossbow out of the air. And I couldn't believe how shocking it was, how poorly done that was, that it just manifested out of thin air.
I mean, at least give her some sort of poncho or something that's covering it up, so it's
Something. It just manifested. She pulled it straight out of her butt, and it made me laugh really hard. So that was a bright side of the film.
See, I would have even have been happy because Raya has the coolest part of Raya's whole fit, I should say, is she has the sword that can sort of extend and become a whip. Very similar to a sword in Demon Slayer as well as a sword in Berserk. Berserk is also an anime that I absolutely love because I've got a dark, twisted side apparently.
Yeah, you have to have a dark, twisted side if you're a big Berserk guy. I love that for you.
But there's always a sword that is more of a whip, and I really love that aspect where it just extends. And I would have loved if it was a crossbow that just sort of folded out in her hand. Is just how easy would that have been? Like
anything else? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, another thing, that sword's awesome. The baby's weird. The baby's such a weird choice. The baby's super weird.
Was so like, I thought it was like, oh, that's funny. They got conned by a baby and some monkeys once they got to what was that? That was
Talon.
Talon, yes. Once they got to Talon, and I'm like, oh, that's funny. But they kept going with it. I'm like, when is it going to go away? Like, we don't need this baby here anymore. Like,
I think if you remove the baby and you just have the three monkeys, that's great. Three diverse monkeys with funny hats that are like ninjas is interesting enough that you don't have to add a weird little ninja baby.
I'd even be happy if they made I know the idea is that they want to have everyone from each one of the factions.
Totally, yeah.
That's the whole reason that they want that to be the case. But at the same time, like, you could have just made him an 8-year-old. Like, I feel like an 8-year-old would have been less off-putting than, like, even Milo in Legend of Korra. He's one of my favorite characters in Legend of Korra. Like,
he's great.
I would have loved to see a Milo-like character just directing three monkeys. Like, it would have made it a lot more interesting. Like, when Milo is in charge of all the flying lemurs and creates like that air force.
Yes, he makes a little army.
His dad's like, "What have I done? Like, this is."
He's created a monster.
That would have been that character, and I would have loved it. Like,
totally.
But instead, it's a creepy baby.
It didn't look like it fit. Like, it looked like it was out of the Boss Baby movies, and they just like clipped it out and threw it in there. So that also kind of removed me from the experience a little bit. Yeah, some weird plot holes, like why were there so many people? I didn't get the flower line when Raya sneaks up to fight the mob lord, and it turns out to be the flower guy, and he's like, "Oh no, I'm just the flower guy," and I didn't understand what the reference was, and why were so many people downstairs guarding him if he's just the flower guy? I don't know.
Well, it doesn't make much sense to me either, because I think the idea is that was supposed to be his shrine, because he was turned to stone right there. But then why have him be guarded? Why have his shrine be guarded? You don't need to guard. It's like, unless they believe, I mean, there is that belief of like honoring the dead and wanting to just protect it. But they, of course, just wanted to have a fun plot twist. That's all that it really was.
Yeah, for sure.
And I will say this too, again, since it was in this chapter, it was relatively easy for them to steal all the gem pieces in
Totally.
all.
Yeah. There wasn't too many hiccups. They didn't have to overcome much. Um, I will say this actually, overall, like I like Raya as a character.
Yeah.
She's not super complex, but she has some good moments, which we'll talk about in the final act there, where she kind of like acts an emotion, and it's actually kind of interesting that she wants revenge. And but overall, like it's fun to root for her. You want to see her succeed. She's not obnoxious. She's just a normal girly out there trying to make it happen, which is refreshing.
Oh, for sure. And one thing, and I know that we've talked about this on the podcast a little bit, sometimes I feel like they try to make characters unrealistically heroic. And I feel like Rhea was a very human character. I don't think there was too
Yeah.
many things that are unrealistic about her character. She's not over here throwing boulders around, but
Right.
at the same time, like she's clearly her dex level is up to 18, so clearly she's got that speed going on for her. And
Yeah. I was just about to comment on, from an animation standpoint, the scene where she's chasing the three monkeys and the baby, and she dives to the window and she takes off her hat and she contorts to the window and she slides and like rolls and puts it back on. Like, looks fantastic.
there was, yeah, that scene, that chase scene alone had several, like when the baby kicked the bowl of fruit and she was able to cut the fruit and
Yeah,
have it visually, there was so many things that were just amazing about this film.
totally.
um I definitely felt like, especially for Tail, when they were trying to get to the gem, it had a lot of first dungeon in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign energy, where it's a little, it's not, it's challenging enough to make them think, but at the same time you know that the DM is fudging some rolls over there to allow them to get
Yeah.
in. I don't know if you play D&D that often or have played it at all, but
Yes. I haven't played in a while, but something I'm hoping working on launching this year is my own D&D podcast with some friends.
there you
Um,
go.
I've no
That'd
idea
be
if it's going to
awesome.
happen because it's going to be, obviously it's a huge time commitment, but that's a dream that I have right now, is try to make that happen this year and launch it before this year ends. So fingers crossed that happens, because I miss playing, and there's so much good D&D content out right now that I've been consuming, that it's just like it gives you that itch, and you want to be a part of a party and you want to make it happen. And so hopefully this year.
I'll be honest, I used to be a huge critter, part of the Critical Role community.
Yeah.
Just one of my favorite things to do was just go and see the artwork that was getting produced for their show. And it was one of those, of course, like anybody who watches Critical Role and says that they never imagined themselves being at the table with
Oh,
all of them,
right. Totally.
they're like, oh, I'd love that my D&D character would be like, so I totally get that front. And
Yes.
uh, one of Kimmy, who was previously on the podcast for Spirited Away, she's our art friend, you might say. And for our birthdays, she'll oftentimes draw us draw our characters, and she has a picture that is one of my favorite paladins that I played, and it's still one of my favorite pictures that I just have saved. So
So cool. Yeah, and in the author writer community, we often joke like, I don't care about how big of a book deal I get. I don't care how many books I sell. I don't care how many books I have published. I only care about receiving fan art from people.
no, I mean, it's, to me, it's just so fascinating because I know it's not necessarily related, but somewhat. One thing that always stood out to me is when George R. R. Martin said that Patty Considine's performance of Viserys Targaryen was more impressive and more meaningful than the actual character that he wrote.
Hmm.
And I've heard some authors say that they get a picture that's sent to them and they're like, oh my gosh, like this is more of my character than I even like envisioned. And
Yeah, that's so cool.
I'm sure that getting something like that is just incredible. And again, I think we could both say that we just aspire to have that happen
Totally. It's
with
really cool.
that. I do also just want to touch real quick. My favorite of, I did love Boone. Boone was great, the restaurant owner, but Tong was my favorite of like their group. and he reminded me of a good version of, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name, but the villain in Mulan.
Oh, no, I almost said Tai Lung. That's Panda.
Is it Shul? I know I have it here somewhere in my
He's
notes.
so cool too now. So now I'm sad I can't remember his name.
Yeah, but my thought process is they literally seem to just copy and paste him over, but take out his
I had
eye,
the
and
same
that.
thought. Totally.
But he was just such a like I have a lot of my family is from Denmark, and there's actually a region in Denmark named after my mom's family's maiden name. So I got really obsessive with like Denmark history. All of my tattoos have a Viking theme. I just love learning about Viking history. I love learning about all of that in general. And
You've got
so
the Viking haircut too.
I've got the Viking haircut. But I always love seeing just that. Like, obviously, I know that in Asia there were more mountain tribes and more mountain, but it almost was that, like, that was the Asian Vikings in the movie, you might say.
Yeah,
Because they had the
totally.
big axes, they were in the snow area, but it was just fun to be able to be there.
Shan Yu, is that what it is from Mulan?
Yes, Shan
Shan
Yu,
Yu.
that's his name. Like, very underrated Disney villain, in my opinion.
So underrated.
Like,
He's so
I think
cool.
it's primarily just because he doesn't have that many lines, but
Yeah, and
he's
his first
still
line is like, "Hey, go let everyone know we're coming." Like, it's not even being stealthy, which is so sick.
exactly. Tell all of China that I'm coming to take it all.
Yeah, which is really hard. Yeah,
I know they wanted to have like Attila the Hun be the villain, but they couldn't get away with actually having Attila. But
yeah, understandable.
we'll eventually talk about Mulan. But I'd love to dive more into that. But is there anything else that you want to discuss in this section of the movie?
I don't think so. I think we covered it.
Awesome. Okay, with our last chapter, once Sisu's death occurs, the water starts drying up, which allows the Droon to come into Fang. Uh, Clouded by her emotions and turmoil, Raya goes to get revenge against Namari. Namari's mother is turned to stone, which is causing bitterness on her own end, and they start to duel. The rest of their group starts to evacuate Fang and get everybody out. And right when they are in the midst of their fight, Rhea discovers that her companions are sacrificing themselves to reassemble the gem to save Fang, but Kamandra in general. Bringing it all together, Rhea shows trust towards Numari and tells her that they can only bring back everybody through trusting one another. Numari combines the gem, and due to that, the Droon are defeated, and not only are the Droon defeated, but all the dragons come back. And the five tribes become one again, and forgiveness, trust, and unity shows that anything that they can all overcome adversity with those three. That's the end. That's the
Yeah,
movie there.
sure is.
I know that you alluded to it earlier, but I'd love it's something I really want to get into as well. But you were alluding to just Rhea's journey to get to this point, and so do you want to just kick us off on your thoughts on just her entire roller coaster of emotions in this part of the movie?
Yeah, I did think it was interesting that I think you kind of touched on it, like just really human response to being screwed over one too many times.
Yeah.
You know, the whole driving theme of the film is trust. We have to be able to trust one another. And at each intersection she hits, every person she tries to trust like betrays her instantly, which is like it's hard to sell the theme when trust never works out for the main character. So I just thought it was great that as she hit the wall where she was just like, I don't trust anybody, and now I'm just gonna kill some bitch.
Yeah. No,
So yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it was awesome to see, yeah, totally understandable, relatable response. Like I'm really angry, and the world's over, but I'm gonna go get my blood and I'm gonna take some people with me, which I
No,
thought was interesting.
it was this last chapter, in my opinion, was probably the best part of the movie, just because, like we already mentioned, Raya's a very relatable character. She has very human emotions. She clearly doesn't trust anyone. She was screwed over by Namari in the early part of the movie, and she just got screwed over by Namari again. And I mean, I feel like everybody can say that they have been betrayed by somebody who's close to them. Everyone has felt that, and it's a very human emotion. And be like, all right, it's time to go kick some ass. Like I am angry, I am hurt, and it's just all those feelings up. And she was showing that, and so you really can't fault her while the rest of the group is over there helping. But at the same time, I think it does a good job because I mean, I know from personal experience, I've been in positions where I know I was not acting appropriately, and I see people almost exemplifying how I should be acting. And when Rhea sees her friends helping people that, in their minds, screwed them all over, because they were saying before, like, no, let's go in, we'll kick all their asses, we'll steal the gem, and screw them. But now they have the attitude, like, no, like, the world is ending. Let's try to save as many people as possible at this point. And just having that level of selflessness and helping them out. And I don't know, it just, I can't. Rhea was an excellent character, and just seeing that journey of how she got there to the end of the movie is just, I mean, it means a lot. It's an awesome experience.
Yeah, she's great. I will go back really quick. I think maybe this is part two. I was holding on to it, but
No, go
something
ahead.
that like filled me with rage, plot hole wise. Obviously, the rune can't touch water, and water drives them away at any turning point. And you remember the flashback with Sisu and her siblings, and they're like forming the gem, and they're surrounded by the blobbies, and they're they're cornered. Her brother's whole thing is that he can make it rain, like he can draw like down a storm.
Yeah.
Couldn't have he just made it rain and then all the blobbies would have had to go away? Am I wrong?
We're not talking about these plot holes. We're not.
Okay,
Just kidding. No,
gotcha.
it is ridiculous. Like, I'll save it for the dragon grade, but there is some really cool aspects to their powers, but I don't think they really thought it through with the particular villain. Like, that's where I think it would have been more beneficial for them to have like a necromancer, or just, I'd even go for a dark dragon. Like why not? Like, I'm
I can
all for
always
it.
go for a dark dragon.
Exactly. Like, there's good dragons. Why can't there just be an evil dragon? But who knows?
Yeah, a black and like purple dragon would have been awesome. That like shot out the blobbies out of his maw or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Because, and again, we'll dive more into the dragon grade, which we're almost to anyways. But I love the fact that there was no fire-breathing dragons in this movie at all.
Yeah, I
But
appreciate that.
is there anything else that you want to discuss here in the final chapter, or just final thoughts in the film in general?
You know, I think I've said my piece with the rain dragon. That was my final qualm with the movie.
No, I will just sort of end on it saying, like, I'm probably not going to rewatch this movie anytime soon. I understand and see why it was the third most streamed movie in 2021. One, because it was just barely, I mean, for a lot of people, they were still in the pandemic for this. I know Utah, they opened everything up 4 months after it all started. So,
Yeah,
but I mean, it's not the worst thing that I saw in the 2020 pandemic era, but at the same time, and the animation was magnificent. I'll talk
it's
more
great.
about it once we get to the dragon grade, but yeah, they could have worked on it. I really think they just spent too much time in the studio going back, and I think that may have been where a lot of these issues came up.
For sure.
Do you have anything to go off of that, or do we want to just jump into the dragon grade?
I agree. I think I just will reiterate my original point. I think the bones are there for a really interesting, compelling world. I think it just executed poorly with some cringy dialogue, some poor character design, and a couple plot holes that were frustrating. And get rid of the baby. But overall, we'll score it in a sec, but overall, it's fine.
Yeah. I think the message of this podcast is that we're anti-baby. I think that's what it comes down to. We did not like
I've
the
always
baby
been
in Spirited
anti-baby.
Away, didn't like this baby in Neverending Story 3, and we don't like the baby here.
Yeah, and also the baby in Spirited Away is horrifying.
Yes, it is nightmare fuel. But
Agreed.
TD, what we're going to go ahead and do is our dragon grade. For those of you that are not aware of what we do, we grade the dragon on 5 categories: design, special effects, character, film, and X Factor. We have a range of 0, which is abysmal, to 10, which is incredible. TD, I want to go ahead and just give the floor to you. What do you give Sisu's design from 0 to 10?
I have Sisu out of 2,
Okay.
and I'll explain why. It doesn't scream dragon to me. It looks like something out of My Little Pony, which is a little distracting. No offense to those who, I know there's a lot of big pony guys out there, but I'm not a part of that culture. Yeah, it just doesn't scream dragon to me. It's really goofy. The only reason it's a 2 and not like at a 0, there's some cool like texture and there's some cool like coloring. She's got some like very like subtle stripes along her back, and her tail's interesting because I know she's a water dragon. And it's giving river creature, which is cool. But overall, like, I legitimately hate her design. Yeah.
No, I totally think that is justified. I I gave it a 4, which is mediocre, but I totally get where you're coming from with the very bad. The reason that I gave it the 4 though is I did really like the design. I don't know what it is, and I'll dive more into it when we get to the X Factor. I really want to just do some deep dive into Asian culture and Asian mythology, because it really seems like with the more Asian based films that dragons have more of a tie to water than there is to fire. Because in Spirited Away, the dragon in that film, it is a
Haku?
water spirit. Yeah,
Right.
Haku. Yes.
Big
Yeah,
fan.
Haku. Yeah, he's amazing.
10 out of 10 design on Hawk.
I'm sure Kimmy's going to be shooting me a text saying that I graded poorly on that one. I just didn't like
Did
the chicken
you?
feet on it. I didn't like the chicken feet on
Oh,
it. But everything
okay.
else, I also love my big beefy dragons. Like I,
You like them thick. Yeah, you like
I
them
love
thick.
them thick.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh my gosh, were you
but
losing your mind in the D&D movie with the thick dragon?
oh, I love that drag. I do like how they sort of leaned into having more of like a flipper tail. It had like the fins of a fish. I don't, like I said, I don't really like it. It was giving me almost ferret vibes. Like just design wise, it
For
looked very much
sure.
like a ferret. And
Yeah,
so that's where I'm
definitely.
saying it's mediocre. But I don't bash on you for saying that it was very bad, because I definitely was in that range. But I have a feeling that it's going to do a little bit better in the special effects grade. So, on a scale of 0 to 10, what did you give the special effects?
I've got a 9.
9. All right. What got you to that decision?
I do think, despite how Sisu looks and a couple of the character, like the baby characters, the young Raya and her friend, like some of the stuff looked a little wonky, but overall, like I think the art direction is really cool. I really love like video game art books. I don't know if you have any of those. Um, but that, like, I'm watching Raya, I'm like, I feel like I would actually buy the Raya art book with like the original paintings and the concept art, because there's some really epic landscapes, and the different clothes and stuff of the cultures I really did think was interesting. And Raya's overall design is great. Raya looks great. I know we're talking mainly about Sisu. I will say her movements, again, not dragon like, but the fluid movements, the animation, the way her mane looks when it got wet, like, is really impressive. As an animation nerd, like, wet stuff's hard to do, water's hard to do. So I think it was great.
No, I agree with you. I feel like I'm a little more generous. I gave it the 10. Like, I don't think they could have designed it. I mean, the special effects could have done it any better. Like, I really think it
Yeah.
was beautiful, especially going back and seeing this other animated dragon film that we did. Like, I feel like I gave that movie so much more credit than
Mm,
this movie because it just looks so much cleaner. And again, I know that's what happens when you get Disney money. And
sure.
here at Big Liz, we're quite we have talked enough shit on Disney. Like, we don't need to talk anymore on them. But I think that it design wise, special effects wise, it was they couldn't have done her better in my opinion. The design, a lot of things could have been better, but the actual special effects. But I totally agree where you're coming from, giving it the 9. But character, I'm quite actually interested to hear where you go with character for Sisu.
I've got Sisu out of 4 for character.
Okay.
Um, I think if it's not Aquafina, it's much higher. I think if you remove some really cringy dialogue, she has some of the worst dialogue of the whole film. She's got some of the worst lines, which isn't entirely her fault, but they do feel like they were written for Aquafina to say, you know.
Yes.
Um, so that's distracting. But like overall, it's not like at a 1 or a 2 because she has some integrity, she has some character, she sees the best in people, she helps Raya, do the same. So she has good motives. She has an interesting motive where she's trying to spread some hope and joy and bring back her family. You can't really be too pissed at that. Is she obnoxious? Absolutely. Did she have some terrible lines? Absolutely. So that's where I land.
Uh, One of our captain of commentators, Josh, is in the comments agreeing with you, saying that Aquafina is a terrible choice. So,
Joshua, praise to thee, my friend. You are wise beyond your years.
but no, I totally agree with that. I jokingly, it's an ongoing joke that I gave Caraxes and Vagar in House of the Dragon like a 7 or an 8. Just sort of like, well, if you look into how much personality they show for not, I'm like, obviously I'd have to re-ag on that. But I will say, like, when a character has almost anti-charisma, that does bring, like, just because a character has a lot of dialogue and has a lot of things to say doesn't mean that they're a great character. And uh Raya had so much better character than Sisu did in this movie. And again, I know that Sisu's supposed to be almost that awkward dragon who's trusting of everyone, but I feel like they could have done it in a lot more graceful of a way than they did with her. So I agree.
Totally.
It's that lower. I gave it the 4 as well.
Nice.
Now the film overall. What did you give Raya, The Last Dragon, 2021?
I put Raya, the Last Dragon, at a 5.
Okay.
It's genuinely, it's not terrible. And I think you can tell with films, especially like a lot of modern Disney films, when you feel like, okay, it feels like you phoned it in a little bit. This was a cash grab. With Rat, I don't think that's the case. I do think they put some effort into building the world and trying to make a unique setting, which as a creative, like, I really appreciate that the setting should be a character in itself. And I think they actually shot for something unique. And that gives me some points. But again, overall, it's just nothing. You don't hate it, you don't love it. It just falls right in the middle. And that's not what you want in your narrative. You don't want people walking away feeling nothing. You either want them to be furious or you want them to be overjoyed. And it put me right smack in the middle. And for that, the score is right smack in the middle.
I can very much understand and appreciate that, and I definitely agree with you where it doesn't feel like it's a cash grab because at this time, and I think it's sort of hard. I mean, for me being in Utah, it's hard to sometimes think about it, and I don't want this to come across as me just being insensitive. But at this time, uh, there was a lot of, I mean, there was the hashtag Stop Asian Hate. Like, there was a lot of anti-Asian sentiment going around in the United States just due to the political nature at the time, as well as just narratives that were being pushed towards, there was a lot of anti-China things going on. So the idea of them pushing this film out at that time, I mean, you'll hear some people say that Disney is just doing it for the cash grab or just trying to be woke. I don't necessarily think that. Like, there is nothing about this film that felt quote unquote woke, you might
Right.
say. And I actually feel embarrassed that I don't know more about Asian culture. I know a disgusting amount of European culture and know probably more history about Great Britain than I care to acknowledge. But with the exception of like anything that we learn in movies or TV show, like the most that I know about Asia, it's only because, and this is I love hardcore history, Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. Those of you that are a history nerd like me, go check him out. Amazing. He does this whole deep dive into the rise and fall of the Mongolian Empire and just how Genghis Khan like emerged. And it's one of the most fascinating things to me. And it's just, I'm learning about a whole nother world that I didn't even know was going on. And it just makes me so much more curious. So that going all around, really off DV, I gave it a 4. I think it's mediocre. It's I think that the movie had a lot of great bones, as you've been saying throughout it, but the execution of getting the actual meat on it was quite pitiful. Which does get us to our last factor, which is the X factor. Again, for the audience, the X factor is just whatever we didn't necessarily grade in this area. This is to either give it more credit than it deserves throughout other ways or bash on it more. But whatever you feel you want to give Sisu, please feel free to go and give her as this X factor score.
Yeah, this one was tough. Uh, yeah, I guess it kind of falls back into the design of Sisu. There are some really interesting, like, old paintings from, I'm not entirely sure which region, but these really cool, like, sea dragons with the horn. And obviously that's what inspired Sisu. And so I gave her a 1 because she touches on at least some cool, like, cultural element. And maybe even if her design was terrible and her dialogue was cringy, if she learned a lesson in the film and had like a cool character moment, maybe her X factor would shifted for me. But she just kind of remained the same character the whole time. She never learned anything. She didn't really change. So for me, she's a 1.
I can totally see where you're coming from, and I'm not going to fault you for giving you that 1. I gave it a little bit more credit. I gave it the 5, and the reason why I'm giving it the 5 is, to me, how they have Sisu flying is fascinating to me, because the idea that I saw behind the flying is it was taking almost like controlling the water, and because each time you stepped, I don't know if you remember seeing it, but it was almost like she was stepping on some water that had formed in a spot. And so it wasn't necessarily like traditional, and again, I'm not sure. I've just seen in media that dragons, especially like Japanese dragons, like they grab onto clouds and that's how they fly. Or you just see traditional European dragons with the wings. So I find it fascinating that controlling the water around to be able to just fly off of that. I found that really fascinating. And again, I don't know if that's taken from Asian mythology or not, but I thought that was a very unique way of trying to pick up the flying aspect of it, but that's why I gave it the 5. But that comes down to Sisu the Dragon in Raya the Last Dragon at the final score of 4.8, which is almost okay. Not quite, but not quite okay, but not quite good, but
You know what? You persuaded me. I actually completely forgot about the way she runs. That was really unique. I'm gonna press up to a 2 in my X
2.
factor.
All
Yeah.
right, let's go ahead and go up to a 2, which does, it's still at the 4.9.
Yeah. That's right though. I don't want to push her
It's
to the 5, but I do appreciate the unique way she flies.
Yeah, it's almost okay. Not quite okay, but almost okay.
Yeah.
But that is Raya, the Last Dragon. Again, thank you so much. TD, I just want to give you a chance to, for whoever wasn't here at the beginning, just give a quick shout out of whatever you want to be shouting out.
Cool.
Take it away.
Cool. Yes, I'm the author of Titan's Nest, and the second book will be coming out this year, and I'm excited. We're doing kind of like a brand relaunch, and I'm going to be doing new covers, some fresh editing for both book 1 and 2, so they're going to be released together as a new set in preparation for the third book. It's going to be a trilogy, and as I mentioned earlier, my dear friend Zach and I, Mr. Zach Zombeck, who's an incredible filmmaker, he has been making a stop motion film about Titan's Nest, and we've been working on that together for nearly 3 years now. So it's been a huge labor of love, and he's the expert on stop motion and filmmaking, but I've had just an absolute blast learning the ins and outs and actually getting in there and getting to work with my hands and help him bring it to life. He's doing all the magic. I just support him. But I'm really excited about that film. It's called Origins of Dazarath. My world is called Dazarath and Titan's Nest. And I'm really excited to share, book 2 and this new film with the Bitten Knights, as we call our fans. So, and I'd love to connect with you guys, the friends at the Big Flying Lizard Pod. You can find me anywhere at TD Orel _author on pretty much all the socials. And I'd love to connect with you and help get a copy of Titan's Nest in your hand if that interests you, or if you want to listen to it on audio. I recommend the audio. It's really great. And if you hit me up, maybe I'll be really nice and give you a free audiobook code.
Hey, you heard it here first, guys. No, I really appreciate coming on. If you guys go and check out his Instagram, there's some really cool reels of what the stop motion film. I think we started messaging when you've dropped your first, I don't want to say trailer, but just tease of what's coming on with that. And it looks good.
I think you guys commented originally, or we connected over. I post a lot of behind the scenes, the BTS, if you will. And yeah, which I think is really interesting because, like I said, we're hand making all the sets, all the characters. We have, I think there's over 12 dragon puppets, and they're like in different sizes, and each one's different. And in my humble opinion, I'd like to think that they would get a higher score than a 2 on the Big Liz Dragon character design score rating, but we'll see. Who knows?
No, I have a feeling that they do quite well just from the tidbits that we've been teased with. But again, thank you so much for everyone who has been here with us. Please feel free to go give TD a follow, and I'll be getting this episode out to you guys next week to have, but in the meantime, please go back and watch, give a follow, and have a good night, y'all. Thank you, TD.
Thank you. This was super fun. Appreciate you asking me.
Of course.
That's all for this week's Dragon Lore. Takes cold and hot, spread shore to shore. Enjoyed yourself? Please join the squad. Follow on social media at Big Liz Pod. And one quick reminder before you go, to rate, review, and share the show. Thank you for listening. It means a lot. See you next week, same time, same spot.